Okay, folks. Well, it is 7:30, so I think we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. Thank you all so much for being here today for tonight's session, this panel discussion on practicing everyday leadership with some fabulous university leaders who you'll meet in just a bit. My name is Anna Wagner. I use she, her, and hers pronouns, and I serve as a member of the student activities team here in Student Life, working with leadership programming as well as local service and civic engagement efforts, and very proud to be a part of the team who's bringing Leadership Week to life. Today's session is a part of Leadership Week 2021. So this is a week-long university-wide collaboration that is promoting leadership efforts and leadership engagement for all students. So it's available to anyone. I have up on the screen right now just a little bit of information about the week itself. All of our sessions this week will fall into one of these 5 themes of Leadership Week: personal exploration, community engagement, wellness, inclusion, and career development. And we're going to talk about each of those 5 themes a little bit tonight. If you enjoyed learning some tonight and want to dive into some more sessions, be sure to check out our full calendar of programs. Again, we go all the way through Friday at go.osu.edu/leadershipweek. You can see that link there on the screen, and I'll drop it in the chat as well. We also want to make sure to promote that this year we are launching an incentive program as a part of Leadership Week. So if you attend multiple sessions, you are eligible for different levels of incentives to be able to recognize that you've dove into your leadership in a really engaged way. So definitely check that out. Check out some more of our sessions. Feel free to pop any questions directly to me in the chat if you have questions about Leadership Week itself. But for the sake of everyone's time and our awesome presenters' time, we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. So I want to just quickly introduce our 4 panelists tonight. We have Dr. Danny Glassman, who is the Associate Vice President for Student Life and Dean of Students. Dr. Indra Leva-Cook, the Interim Assistant Director for Social Justice Engagement for the Multicultural Center. Dr. Kiana Smith, who is the Director of Residence Life, and Tess Smith, who is a Learning and Development Consultant for Buckeye Careers. And really grateful for all 4 of you for being here today. Just for a little bit of an overview of how this is going to look tonight, y'all, I have some questions prepared for our panelists that we're going to jump into, but we also want to make sure that we get into any questions that you have for our team. So there is a chat option at the bottom, or a Q&A. We're going to use the Q&A option for tonight's session. So please submit any questions for our panelists through the Q&A, and I'll make sure to save time at the end of our panel to ask any of the great questions that y'all have. We are not going to do any unmuting because we're going to do webinar style today. And please put all those questions in the Q&A. It just makes it a little bit easier for us to triage on the back end. But that is our vibe for tonight. So to get started, I am going to just have our panelists jump in with an opening question of what leadership means to you and how you promote that at the university. And I'm going to pick on Indra first.
All right. Wow, that is actually a question, right? Like, what does leadership mean? I guess it means different things, right? Because it looks different for everybody, I guess, and especially for students. I think when I think of leadership, I think about the shadow that we cast actually as leaders. And I can remember where this, like, there was a training a long time ago here at OSU where I actually like heard about this concept and loved it, because it's right. It's like, you know, like you are always casting a shadow. Somebody is looking up to you, like, you know, you don't have to be in a leadership role to be a leader. So, and I think that that's how I see leadership. It's like, you know, be very conscious of what you're doing, because it always impacts somebody. And there's always somebody looking up to you, no matter what. So that's how I see leadership myself. And how do I promote it? Well, I hope that I am, right? That's my hope. So when I talk to my students, I work with communities that are underrepresented at OSU, and I always am curious about their experiences. I listen to their experiences and encourage them to actually to speak up and to share their experiences with people. So I think that that part of like empowering, that's the leadership part. It's like empowering to tell their stories, empowering to give those experiences, to share those experiences, find those commonalities with other groups. I think that that's my role, and that's my my role in the university to promote that leadership. I'm sorry, I'm just like, blah, blah, blah. I need water. Next.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Indra. Tess, how about you? Thoughts here?
Thanks. That was a great way to kick us off, Dr. Cook. I agree with a lot of what you said in terms of thinking of the impact of your leadership, and leadership definitely not being a positional experience. I think for me, cultivating some kind of collective vision and then having the action to back up whatever that vision is really important to me. Most of my personal leadership perspectives come from creating a more just or equitable world as kind of the basis of what I hope to do. Although I don't think leadership has to look that way for everyone, that's definitely what it means for me. In terms of how I promote that at Ohio State, my job is working with supervisors of student employees and student employees for the most part. And I think that often goes as an invisible type of labor and contribution that happens at institutions, especially huge ones like Ohio State. But we're really fortunate to have programming and resources that go directly to supporting that effort. So for me, I'm really lucky. I get to hear the stories of the work that our student employees do, our supervisors do. I get to bounce around campus and celebrate that work and talk about who hasn't been invited to the table. How might I not be seeing the full picture of a situation, and kind of advocate for that collective vision that we create in student employment specifically.
Dr. Glassman, Dr. Smith, anyone have something they want to add here?
I can jump in. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. I think that leadership is certainly, as both of our other panelists have described, certainly depends on both the person as well as even the situation. And so I see leadership as a ongoing process that no matter how seasoned one is, we're always learning as leaders. And so leadership is about actively learning, listening, and leading. And so doing that in wherever you're situated, whether it's in a formal position or it's not. Often in student organizations or in companies, you can see many individuals who are certainly strong leaders, and it might not be the position that they're in that indicates their leadership. It's through the impact that they have because of the meaningful contributions that they make, because they serve and they give back to the organizations that they're in. So for me, that's leadership. It's about service to others, and it's about leading from wherever you're at. And so I try to do that by instilling in students the ability to see themselves as leaders, even when they're not in formal positions, and really just encouraging student involvement and engagement and taking on those opportunities, because inevitably they will give you the experiences to stretch yourself in your leadership by just being a member of a student organization or a student employee or being involved in any of the academic elements of it. Just really focused on your leadership. And so for me, it's both a journey, it's never ending. Our leadership is ever evolving, and it doesn't matter where you're at, is where you can lead.
I would agree with what all the panelists have said thus far, as leadership is concerned, being formal or informal. It could also be where you're chosen or you earn a leadership position, and then people just look up to you, and you may not hold any type of position because of the way you carry your life, the way that you do your actions and your beliefs. For me, I promote leadership. I take a team approach to leadership. And so for me, I let my team know residence life isn't going to be successful without everybody included, right? We all have different titles and we have different responsibilities, but it takes us all to do well. And so for me, we have tons of leadership positions, whether it be the RA position or student group positions. But a big thing that I do is try to spend time with different populations and groups of students and staff, and hearing from them and learning about them, and then sharing opportunities with them when they are presented to me, or creating those opportunities when I'm able to, for people when I know that it's something that they're interested in. And then the last thing I would say is encouraging staff and students. And so as they, go through their time at Ohio State or wherever they're at, because I'm still connected with people at other institutions, just encouraging them as they go about their daily life, whether it be a leadership position, a job, or just reflecting on different things that may occur in their lives. So that's the way in which I promote leadership.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. I think you all really hit the nail on the head of some things that we believe to be true about leadership in student life, right? It's a process, not a position. It's an ongoing journey. It's intentional and collaborative, and it happens out of a team. So thank you all for sharing those beautiful answers. So Tess, I think I'm going to start with you on this next question, because I want to think a little bit about what are some key skills that students can develop in their leadership roles that might serve them in future career paths. How is that connection fostered through leadership experiences at Ohio State?
Solid question. I think that it's important for students to recognize that they're in a learning situation in the first place, not just students, but all of us. Again, going back to my own context, a lot of the work that I do is to help students and staff and faculty identify that learning is not siloed. It happens across environments. Things that help you to be successful in your coursework also help you to be successful in your jobs, your personal life, and future career aspirations. So I think, first of all, just acknowledging, okay, I'm learning in this moment, and trying to make those connections is really important. You might leave a leadership experience that you're in and say, what does that connect with in other areas of my life? What parts of me woke up in that situation and what parts were kind of dormant? So I do think that having some level of recognition of all spaces as learning opportunities is a pretty important one. Another thing that helped me, especially as a first-gen student, is just like asking, hey, what's going well here? What areas do you see me kind of shining in? What are ways that I can contribute to that collective vision that we're working towards? So oftentimes the folks who you're serving have really good insights to what you're good at and areas of growth. And also you have supervisors and mentors who can see things in you that you may not see in yourself. So I don't want to dominate this entire question, but I think being really plain about asking other people for feedback, and then also honoring spaces as learning spaces, whether it's a classroom or some other co-curricular environment, is really important.
Thank you, Tess. Do any of our other panelists have thoughts about this question? Andrea, you nodding.
Yes, I can go. I was waiting to see if anybody else was going to jump. So similar to Tessa, I think that for me, in coming to this country as an immigrant and, and after graduating from college, and kind of like started working in higher education right away without actually knowing too much about the system per se. It was a learning opportunity, right? So having that curiosity as an international student, as an international staff, I think that the curiosity to learn and to continuously learn and ask the questions, like Tessa said, like not to be afraid, and to ask questions and get feedback is very important. And to find mentorships. I think that mentors are key on this, on leadership, because you have those relationships where you can ask the questions, where they can be honest with you and tell you like your areas of growth, or like, you're really shining in this, on this skill, but let's work on these other sets of skills so you can actually, grow as a professional. So I think that being curious, being able to communicate with your mentor and with your peers, and also I think that just like that eagerness for learning is important.
Yeah, I would add to that the ability to listen, right? And so as a leader, you may earn a position like I mentioned before, or you may be appointed to a position, or people just look up to you. And sometimes we can get caught up in the day-to-day of doing and not listening to others around us, whether it be a mentor or the the groups that we're leading, or just the people around us. So I think that is huge and important as you move up. I think about being in a position of a director, right? So there's a lot of staff and there's a lot of students, and sometimes you can get out of touch with that. So I have to make time to sit and listen and engage. I think the other thing is volunteering. I think is really helpful for a lot of my leadership positions. It started with Hall Council, and then the advisors like, you should be an RA, or just stepping out there to be involved in different things, and opportunities present themselves, or people see you when you're out and about and doing things. So I think volunteering, but don't do too much, right? You want to make sure academics come first, and you're not doing too much outside of academics where your academics may suffer. And I think listening is key and important.
Yeah, and I'll go off of that. I think Dr. Smith really hits a key area about being involved in leadership opportunities, but not going too far, and making sure that the quality of the leadership experiences outweighs maybe the quantity. And so I really think that is an excellent point. I'll also, just as I think about my own journey of leadership as an undergraduate student, my undergraduate degree is, of all things, was in computer science. I never thought I would be a dean of students at the Ohio State back then, but it was by being involved in as a resident assistant, student government, being involved in an athletic program. It's just those various aspects of the student experience that helped me know that my calling was to do student affairs work and to try to help inspire future leaders in the college environment. And so I think as you're going through your journey, it's leaving your eyes open and your ears open to new experiences and allowing yourself the space to explore those in your leadership. Because had I not done that, had I not had a mentor who suggested the field of student affairs for me, and that I sort of paused and listened, as Dr. Smith really pointed out, I wouldn't maybe be here today. And so I just think that as you're going through your experience, always keep that curiosity, that listening, to see what might be the next experience and your purpose in life.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those contributions. I think the sky's the limit in terms of what you can get out of your career preparation through your leadership experiences. And I think a lot of you highlighted this beautiful, the unintentional growth that you're going to get, the connections that you weren't planning on, the experiences you weren't planning on, the maybe new career paths or new connections that come out of those opportunities of putting yourself out there. Well, Dr. Glassman and Dr. Smith, y'all started to talk about this a bit. So I sort of want to run down this road of wellness a bit as one of our themes of Leadership Week. And I want to think a little bit about y'all and your own leadership and your own wellness. Can you talk about a time where you might have struggled to balance wellness in your leadership? How did you recognize? I know no one has ever had this problem before, right? Especially not over the last 18 months. But how did you recognize that in yourself? And what did you do to maybe course correct a bit if you felt you were a bit out of whack?
It's a day-to-day thing for me. I would say, working in res life, it's a day-to-day thing, even before COVID, right? And so you have your days that are challenging, and then you have your days that seem to go smooth. And so what I always tell people is you have to stay in tune with yourself. You have to think about what's important to you. What are your values, right? What centers you? And so for me, my spirituality is super important. So I make time for that in my life. When COVID happened, me and a group of my friends would pray every morning at 7:30 in the morning for over a year. And that was a priority to me, and I didn't let anything interrupt that. And so it's carving out time to do those things that are important to you, that help center you. And also, it's okay to cry. Like, there are days when I just sit in my office and cry, and I say, Kiana, get it together, and then move forward and do my to-do list. So you have to understand yourself, and you have to have a release, right? It could be crying, it could be working out, it could be writing, it could be a lot of different things, but you have to have some sort of outlet. So my advice would be to make sure you make time for those things that are important to you, to carve it into it. So my spirituality, my friends and my family is important. Also figure out some sort of outlet that's super, super, super important for you to do. And then recognize you're not alone, right? And so I have a supervisor who is supportive of me. I have family who's supportive of me. And so being able to process through and talk to them and know that I'm not alone. All of us have our challenging days. If I have not met anyone who hasn't had that. And so I tell my staff and students and friends, you know, if you're not okay, then it's going to be hard for you to help others be okay. So you have to make yourself a priority while you balance everything else in your life. But please make time to do those things that are important to you, that mean a lot to you. I often tell my staff, there's been times when I tell everybody, this week I need you to take half a day, a morning or afternoon, to do something that brings you joy, that makes you happy, because life is short and you don't want to look up one day and say, you know, I didn't get to enjoy my life and everything that I worked so hard for.
Excellent points, Dr. Smith. And I'll go off of that. And I had a colleague who once said, self-care is the best healthcare in reference to our wellness and how important it is to really refill our buckets and to be intentional in the ways that bring us joy and happiness, and also recharge us. And so I think first and foremost, it's just looking within yourself to see, how do you recharge? And what does bring you an increase in your wellness? Because for some, like me, it's being active and it's doing active things, whereas others, it is a more reflective space to sort of maybe be more alone, or to journal, or to write. And maybe it's a combination of all of those things, but really, like leadership being a journey, so is wellness. And so it's just trying to identify the aspects of your wellness that you really enjoy, trying to build on those, and trying to make sure that you've got a balance in terms of your wellness as well. So you've got some physical, you've got some emotional, you've got all the elements of and dimensions of wellness. You've kind of thought about and considered them because it'll help you be able to focus on what I've heard called work-life integration, trying to find ways to integrate our work and our school and all the many activities that we do with our wellness activities. And so I try to build it in to my days. So if I can, getting to the gym before I go into the office, because I don't know where my day is going to go or when it's going to end. So if I get it out in the morning, usually it starts my day off a lot better. But it doesn't always happen. And so I think grace is really important to ourselves, because we can sort of create goals for wellness. And then when we don't achieve them, we honestly create more stress for ourselves, because then we're beating ourselves up that we didn't make it to the gym, or we didn't do this for the wellness. And so it's trying our best to meet our wellness goals, while at the same time giving ourselves the grace and compassion that we're doing the best that we can. And every day is a new day, and it's a new wellness journey. Those would be my advice.
Tessa or Indra, anything you want to add before we move on to our next question? Beautiful. Love that. Y'all summed it up so wonderfully. So I'd love to pivot a little bit and think about our relationship to community engagement efforts and how those are interlinked. And so hopefully everyone knows Ohio State's motto at this point. It's education for citizenship. And when I think about citizenship, I'm really intentionally thinking about a relationship to our community rather than maybe a legal definition of citizenship. That's the way that we define it with the social change model of leadership, is our engagement with our community efforts. So I'm wondering, what role do you all feel like student leaders play in being active citizens in Ohio State and then the broader Columbus and global communities? So what is the responsibility of student leaders to be active citizens in our community? A really light question.
Well, I'm happy to go first. I just really appreciate this question a lot, because I think it does tie back to our mission as a land grant institution here at Ohio State. And because of that, it's a commitment to educating our state, educating the communities in which our educational institutions are situated, to make a difference and to try to make those communities healthier, better, and more successful. And so I think any student who's at Ohio State, and staff and faculty member, really buying into the idea that the education that we're providing is contributing to the community development of all the communities in our state and even the world. And so I think there's a really big component of citizenship throughout that work. So that's whether it's just making sure that students know how to vote, how to be involved in the elections process, and finding ways to have their voice heard, or whether it's just knowing how to manage living in the community when students move off campus and live in the local community, learning the community organizations that exist in Columbus and finding ways to give back. As a new person to Columbus myself, it's been wonderful to learn about many of the community organizations that are here servicing Columbus and the state of Ohio. And so if there's one that any student, if you're passionate about a certain area, I bet you in our community of Columbus, there exists a nonprofit or another organization that you can give your time, talent, and treasure to. And that's a part of being a Buckeye, is really identifying the things you're passionate about and giving back to your community. For many of you, that's just going to be Ohio State for now. You're going to give back through student organizations, student involvement, possibly giving back through donating to certain causes. And so I think all those things are great. And as you continue and maybe you move off campus, or you graduate and you move into the communities that you're in, is taking an active role in the community you're situated in and using the leadership experiences that you've gotten during your time at Ohio State to be a leader in your community. And so I think there's a huge, and that's an exciting part of being here at Ohio State, is there is a huge focus on our students graduating, and it happens. I've met alums and I've heard of alums who are so actively engaged in their communities and have made such a difference. And so that's an expectation we all have of you students, is that you go off and just be a part of the change in whatever community you're a part of.
The only thing I would add to that is the hope for you all to be positive contributors to whatever environment you may choose to be a part of. I think it's important for you to be engaged in a positive way. We say in residence life, we're only as safe as our users. And so within residence life, it's everybody's responsibility in that residential community not to allow people to tailgate and not to allow people to do things that may bring hurt and harm to the community. And I would say that any community that you're a part of, that you're a positive contributing member, that you add to it, that you help it be a better place. And if others join in along with, then that is a positive community that you're helping to engage in. I mean, you go all over the world and you'll see Ohio State folks. And so no matter where you go, you hear OHIO, people are watching you and looking at you, right? And so you represent the university no matter where you go. And so that's also a huge and important responsibility you have. And our hope is that you're a positive contributing member. So when you say that OHIO, people look at you, like, oh yeah, they're a positive, Buckeye contributing to the community.
Oh, go ahead, Tessa.
Go for it, Tess.
Thanks. I was just going to build on that a little bit. My thoughts are kind of half formed at this point in the evening, but this just kind of triggered me to think about the notion of leadership as not being positional. And it made me think of when I was an undergrad and my parents would say, what is insert institution doing? So I didn't go here, but for example, them saying something like, well, what does Ohio State do about this? And I kept saying they. And I think then when I got into my student leadership role, I started saying we or I, and sort of had that ownership of the community I was a part of. So yeah, I want to encourage student leaders to think about, you're a part of Ohio State. So when you're articulating something Ohio State does, you're saying something we do. And if there's something that Ohio State does that you don't feel like you align with, find a way to use your voice, elevate the voices of others, ask critical questions about why we at Ohio State do something a certain way. Folks here really do care about what you think, if you have a sense of belonging, how you feel. We care about the words you use. We care about your safety. So even if your leadership is not positional, the fact that many of you do have a position of leadership, that's a great way to advocate for others. And if there's something that you feel like you can't quite get on board with and say, we do this at Ohio State, I would just encourage that to be a trigger to talk to somebody who may have a position that you could kind of elevate that up in.
Indra, did you want to add something as well?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of like related to that, and because I was thinking about the great things that our alumni are doing. So I've been here at Ohio State for what, like 12 years or so, more or less, and during that journey, I mean, during this time, I mean, I've seen students that were engaged in leadership roles here at Ohio State, and they were very passionate about what they were doing with their communities, and they translate that into those communities that they moved to after graduation. So I think, like Tessa said, like they transform also that day into a we when they move to those communities. And I think that there's something that Ohio State is actually doing really well with our students, across campus.
Thank you so much. So speaking of being responsible, positive members engaging in our community, I think something that we know is really important is to center inclusion and inclusive leadership as we engage in that community. And so I'm curious what practical things you all do, like really tangible ways that you would challenge teams you're a part of to be more inclusive and equitable. So how have you used your leadership voice to create more inclusive spaces? And Indra, I may pick on you first. Oh no, Kiana's ready. She's ready to go. You got your out.
So you're always learning as a leader. And I think my style and what I hold true to has changed over the years. And one of the things that I was exposed to was the inclusive excellence model by AAC&U, where you use an inclusion lens in all that you do. And so for me, that's what I try to do, thinking about policies, procedures, practice. Is everyone included? How will this impact others? And that takes a lot of time and energy, right? And so when I make decisions, it's not just, hey, this is what we're going to do. I'm talking to other folks. I'm bouncing off people. So in our department in residence life, we continue to say, you got to use an inclusion lens, And that means looking at everything from an inclusion lens and seeing who's involved, who's missing, whose voices and being heard in all that we do. And that takes a lot of work and time. And there will be missteps in it, but that's what we've been dedicated at doing. And, we have a lot of work together. There isn't a point, I believe, that you are inclusively excellent. Like you have arrived. You're always learning and growing. Times are always changing. Terminology is always changing. Words you can and can't use are always changing. And then our student populations change over time. And they look different, and they have different experiences. Like right now with COVID, we have a group of folks who have experience with mask in a classroom, and at some point they're going to join us, right? And that's going to be their experience. And so always trying to look at everything from an inclusion lens, who is included, who's missing, whose voices are being heard. And in those moments, reaching out to folks to make sure when you're making those decisions, you are thinking about everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that making sure that all the voices are part of these decisions is key. And also to keep in mind, like you said, like it takes longer. It might take longer, right? Because you want to make sure that everybody is included and every voice is in there and it's present. I also think that when we talk about being inclusive in like in leadership, and is that we need to think that it's not a competition, right? So it's not about who deserves more than the other. It is about listening to everybody's experience and acknowledge and actually validate those experiences, because we all have something to bring to the table. So I think that that's the only thing that I will add.
I'll jump in too, and I think all the points are very valid, and certainly I want to say ditto to all of the things that has been said. Where I would also add for inclusion is it really is a verb, and that it takes action to include and to keep including others in decision making, in access to higher education, to access to programs, to resources. And so I think it's an active process that that we have to continually evaluate and try to invest in order to have inclusion happen. So we talk a lot about diversity on the college campus, and that is sort of we've got diversity, but really the inclusion part is where the real work has to happen, and it takes everyone to do that work. So as leaders, we have the opportunity to try to role model and try to facilitate that. If you've taken the Strengths Finder or Strengths Quest before, one of mine is input. And so I think where I see my inclusion really come out is just seeking a lot of different input from different areas and constituents. And certainly being at a place like Ohio State, there's awesome different areas and different just people and different ideas and thoughts, and just trying your best to hear and listen and take those in. But then it's also from a tangible way around our programs. Are they accessible? Are they inclusive? Are our buildings, our facilities, the demographics? I mean, there's so many aspects of inclusion. And so I think it's really trying to encourage everyone to do their best to just think about who is included here, who is not included here, and how can we always try to be expanding that circle of inclusion. So if that's creating new programs that give certain identity groups or new programs the ability to succeed, that's awesome because it's increasing inclusion. If there is accessibility issues on our campus, we're able to address those, it's increasing inclusion for everyone. And so I think as we just all take that lens of inclusion in our work, it's through our daily practices of that, saying, hey, what are we not seeing? What are we not thinking about? What are we not including? Because it will help us in the end have better decisions, having more inclusive environments, and have a more equitable place for everybody to be successful and to thrive.
Thank you all so much. Oh, Tess, go for it.
I definitely agree with what everyone has said. I was just going to go into my philosophical mindset here and be a little imaginative. I think on this note, even what Dean Glassman just said about the thriving aspect, I think the notion of thriving can be really loaded. There are a lot of things we can unpack about the word thriving. But if I think about inclusion, I think about this cultivation of joy, and we're so far behind in how we do inclusion, inclusive education in an institutional setting, that I feel like we need to meet these basic metrics of allowing people to be healthy and well so that they can learn. And if you could take that to the next level, that's where I feel really excited and motivated, especially from a leadership perspective, is what would it be like, not just if everyone in my classroom could physically enter the room, but if they could actually cultivate joy in this space. So I think something that we can do from a leadership lens is say hey, what does queer joy look like in this environment? What does Black joy look like in this environment? And consider some of those things that may not actually be possible. We may have a lack of resources. We may have too much stuff going on in the world to even meet the mark of basic needs, let alone cultivating joy. But to give space for folks to actually imagine that and then do what we can with the resources we have, I think is an important step to at least think about as we continue to try and make progress in a lot of different areas.
Beautifully stated, all of you. We also had someone throw in something wonderful in the Q&A that I want to share from one of our audience members, that if we could just start from a place of considering how our decisions, programs, et cetera, will be experienced by our most vulnerable communities, then we might just create spaces that will empower us all, which I think is a really incredible and accessible future, right? Yes, it's an imagination, and it's also something that we can all work towards in a very real way. So I would love to pivot just a bit, although honestly, very much in line with conversations we're already having. I think values have very much grounded a lot of the answers that y'all have provided. And we know that practicing values-based leadership is something that we spend a lot of time talking about in our work here in student life. And I am curious how you all center your own values in the leadership that you practice, and how do you check in with yourself to make sure you're leading in a way that is in line with your values?
I mean, for me, I've always made a commitment to ensure that I don't do anything that goes against my values, right? And so, and it's super important to me. For me, I have examples of a display in my personal space in my office as a constant reminder for me. And in those moments where I have to make decisions that may be a bit counter to what I value or is important to me. So if I, get a directive, I make sure that I am communicating with my supervisor my thoughts and feelings on it. But I'm going to display a united front. I'm going to be a team player. And then, also in those moments, asking the why behind it, just so I can have a good understanding. But for me, my values are important to me. And so if it comes a point where I feel like my personal values are not in line with what I'm doing, then it's time for me to look for another opportunity. I mean, that's just how I feel personally. There are some ways in which I may pick a battle. But I'm a firm believer, like I can't function in a space in which I don't feel comfortable. And then also there are some things that are important to me, like inclusion, right? Equity is important to me. And so, I know in residence life, we have a lot of work to do. And so that's part of the reason why I took on the role. So I continue to try to move us forward as an organization too. And so while there are some practices we may have that, I know need to be approved, it's on the list to try to get that stuff done. And so again, for me, being a part of the organization, trying to move it forward, being vocal about how something may not align, but if it comes to a place in which I have to choose between my values and a leadership position, whether it be something that's earned or appointed, I would choose my values over that. And that's just how I am. I know that's not everyone, but that's me.
I'll jump in and echo that values-based leadership is critical as anyone's thinking about how you can show up and how you can contribute to your leadership. It's first and foremost thinking about what are your values, what drives the decisions that you make, the values that you hold, looking back at our histories and our backgrounds and where we grew up, and lots of things inform our values, our families, our religions, our faiths, our experiences. And so really leadership, again, we talked about it being a journey, it's because it also just involves an exploration of your values. And so for me, I think as I was even trying to choose what career I wanted to go in, it was trying to think about what my values were as an undergraduate student, and how a career fits those values or doesn't. And that alignment being really critical, because as none of us would have expected, the pandemic is a great example of a challenging time that all of us have had to walk through, and having values that can help guide decision-making through that. So having values of inclusion, of equity, of values of transparency, values of care, and all of the various things that each of us can have that sometimes are similar and we have shared values. Sometimes they're very different. And so one thing I love about working on a team is that we each bring our own personal values to that team. And sometimes those are very different. And it's trying to hold all of those values together and to recognize and honor everyone's personal values, while at the same time trying to, as a team, figure out what our shared values are, and we work towards those together, but while supporting everyone's personal values. So I see that show up sometimes as, let's go back to the wellness part that we talked about. I hold wellness as a personal value, and that wellness is really critical to me in my own self, but also to role model that for our staff and others. And so I hone that, but I know sometimes it's challenging to get in the full wellness, or I don't always every day meet my wellness goals. And so although it's a value, it sometimes is in incongruence with some of the other things that are going on in my life. But because I value it, it means I will find the opportunity to focus on my wellness. And so I think values serve as such an inspiration to our lives and to our journeys as leaders. So really thinking about those things, and then thinking about your own unique self and what unique values and experiences that you bring to your leadership, and infusing those in your work. So those are a few things that I would say on this.
I can share that. I think to your question of like, what's a technique that I use to manage this? I'm definitely open to having my mind changed about this, but I think maybe I just need to be grittier. I think that sometimes I do have to do things that might push my values, like for survival or like safety, maybe. So I think that there are situations where I might pause and say like, okay, I can't enact my like total value in this space. How could I bring my values into it? But just to go off what was just shared, I think wellness is an important piece to kind of recharge and be creative in how you navigate that. So if there's a day where I feel like I had to do something that doesn't actually feel right to me, I might just take a day to go to a place where I do get to engage my values really fully. And particularly right now, I'm thinking of when I was a grad student, I was advising students, undergrad students. We weren't allowed to participate in any like activism whatsoever that would show like social or political beliefs. And I absolutely needed that job. I needed that program. So I think about the ways that the language I used, the way I tried to help people feel safe in a space did engage what I needed in order to express activism and my values. But knowing that I couldn't go to a particular like presentation, or I couldn't go to a protest or something in that context, I think it was sort of challenging. How do I still enact these values in other ways? And how do I just get away from this situation? Because ultimately I want to influence it in the future. So I will say that for me personally, I think sometimes I do things that push my values or make it difficult to express them. And on the piece about wellness, finding a way to recharge from that and still be your full self is really important.
That's a really important point. Thank you for bringing that up, Tess. Andrew, did you have something you were dying to share? Are you cool if we jump into the next question?
I was just going to say that the practice that I do is just like, I constantly check in on like, what is the value that is informing my decisions at that time? And how is that if I'm having conversations with my team or with my peers, have to be very conscious of those and how my values are showing up, and just to make sure that everybody is included as well.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you. So I'd love to jump into some audience questions because we have a few that have come in. I want to start with one that I think I know I really resonate with, of how you deal with feelings of insecurity with leading others and feeling that you may not be cut out for handling a role or situation. I think I spend more times maybe in imposter syndrome than out of it. So I feel whoever submitted this question. Thoughts for maybe not how to beat it, but how to lead through it, even if you don't necessarily always believe that you are the number one person for the job. Or maybe you do, and I love that. So tell us your confidence tips too, either way.
I think for me, I have those moments all the time. Like sometimes in my office, like I am the director of Res Life at Ohio State. Wow. So I think that sometimes, and I think for me, it's just reminding myself that I was chosen to be here at this time for a reason, right? It's not by accident. And that's what I have to keep telling myself. So what can I do within my sphere of influence to create positive change or continue some of the great practices that already happen. And so it's constantly saying, I am here for a reason. This is not a mistake. And it's tied to my values, right? My spirituality, where I feel like everything happens for a reason. And so you need to take hold of that and, seize the opportunity. So I do find times when I'm like, I cannot believe this, but it is my reality. And just checking in with myself and snapping out of it and, continue to do the work that needs to get done.
I have to say that, yes, I mean, that happens a lot. And I have a folder in my office with little notes from peers, from students that I keep. And that when I have those doubts about myself, I just open that folder, read them. And I'm like, and this is the reason why I'm here. And I go on. So I think that that's what I do. It's hard to get out of that feeling of like, I'm not sure if I can do this or if I'm the right person. But when I go back and read those experiences and read those messages, I'm like, yes, and this is who I am, and this is why I'm here, and let's move forward.
Keep a warm fuzzies folder, like it's literally one of the folders in my inbox too, of even the tiny little affirmations. Sometimes that's what you need.
Yeah. And talking to people, right? I mean, also I'll go like with my peers and my, my coworkers, and I'm very open about it. And I'm like, you know what, I am this space right now, and I don't know how to get out of it. And having a conversation helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Glassman, I cut you off, so go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I love the warm fuzzies folder. I have that as well. And sometimes that is the thing that you need that day because you're having those questions. Another thing that I learned, and this is from Brene Brown's work about daring greatly, but is, sometimes it's the stories we create in our own head and just getting those out. And so there's moments probably daily that I create some story in my head about the truth or reality I think something is, and how it may or may not lead to me thinking I'm an imposter around a certain thing, whether it's speaking at something or it's leading a meeting around something or a topic that we're all discussing. And so I think for me, it's having a core group or around me who I can share those. This is what I'm thinking. This is a story I've created in my head around this. And usually by getting it out, it allows me then to do something with it. And my group I still call them my kitchen cabinet, because our kitchen sink group, because we always get around the kitchen, right? Like in a home, and that's where we discuss and talk about things. And so I reach out to them to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And usually they can build me up or they can affirm what I'm feeling or thinking. So that's certainly, I think, a tangible way that we can think about that.
Awesome. This is a fun one. So I'm excited to hear what y'all's answers are, but what's a leadership moment that has made you really proud to be a leader? And I'd love to hear an answer from everyone on this one, if that's okay. Because brag on yourselves a bit. Like what brought you that moment of joy? We're talking about joy. We're talking about the warm fuzzies. What did it for you?
For me, I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. Sorry for using that M word, but I'm very proud of the city that I'm from. And most people have heard some very negative things about the community, but greatness comes out of it. And so for me, just being able to go back home and and share with my family and friends, and just represent a city that's great, that gets a bad rap, and show some of the positivity. I think for me, earning my PhD was huge. I tell this story where I went to an on-site admissions event for an institution that I ended up graduating from. And the admissions counselor said, based on your ACT scores, you will not be successful in college. And so that stuck with me. And I've earned 3 degrees since then. And so I think being from Flint and representing them in a positive way and earning that degree when I was told that, based on my scores, I wouldn't even be successful. And now I have a PhD. And so those are the things for me. Like, I'm not one to brag or boast, but I take a lot of pride in Flint and earning my PhD.
I literally told you to brag about yourself, Kiana. So you understood the assignment. You're good.
I think, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Danny.
Well, I was going to just say, I think our pause is probably, at least for myself, reflective of, I like to brag on others probably a lot more than I like to brag on myself. And so it's probably why we're all in thought around that. But I appreciate this question because I do think it's really important as leaders to be proud of the things that you accomplish throughout your leadership journey, and to take moments to reflect on those and to celebrate. Because the leadership journey is not always the easiest, and there's going to be challenges along the way. And so really being able to pull upon those things that you can celebrate and say, oh yeah, I did that. I made that happen. I can make this happen too, even though it seems like a challenge or that we can't. I think sometimes those moments in my life or career that I can reflect back on that I'm really proud of often get me through the really tough moments, because that resiliency, I can say, I've done that. So I think I can do this. It might be a different problem or a thing we're trying to solve, but I can do it. So I think about, I'm from Pocahontas, Arkansas, to go back to my hometown. And in sixth grade, I was like, I'm going to be the only people who go to gymnastics classes and things are the cheerleading team. And so I'm going to try out. And I tried out in the sixth grade and I made the seventh grade cheerleading team. And so an article was written about me in my hometown newspaper called Busy Seventh Grader Tumbles Over Gender Barrier. I didn't even know I was going over any barrier. I just really wanted to tumble. But for me, it was a moment of thinking about having almost a just disregard for things and just going for it. And maybe not thinking about like the larger scheme of things. And that has been through, and then I just kind of traveled throughout my career. I didn't make the high school band because I didn't make a high enough score to use Dr. Smith around on the test to get into the band, but all my friends made it. And so I got my mother, who never went to school, to go to school and to try to get me on the band. Who asked to be on band? But I wanted to be a band, and I loved it. And I was the only all-state member my senior year in band. And so I was like, that silly test, it obviously is not an accurate measure of success. So I think, and those are just a couple examples there, but I think those have always pulled throughout my career about just really going for it. And you might not always make it, but sometimes you really do. And it just is inspiring for yourself, but it can also be really inspiring for others. So by my senior year in high school, there had never been a male who had been on the color guard, and I was the first one. And by my senior year, there were 4. And I'm proud of some work that I've gotten to do around LGBTQ work throughout my career, because that's a personal value around the diversity and equity that I honed. And so I think just thinking about those values that you honed and experiences that you've had and holding on to those during some really tough moments that you'll have as a leader will help you pull through.
I can go. So for me, I think multiple things too, right? I think that, like just being here and where I am, like the role that I have as an immigrant, as like being here by myself in this country, like having no family here, like in pushing, all the way to where I am at this point, like studying and getting all these degrees, and that's a big one. But I think that personally, I think that like I went through all this, and then I got divorced, and then everything just like fell, right? And just like being able to come back and like being like a single mom and just like push through. I think that that's one of like my most important moments with my family. But also like those moments, I mean, I was thinking about like a couple of weeks ago that one of my former students called just to ask me a question about how to approach the situation in the company that she is a vice president right now. And I was like, okay, well, you probably know the answer already, but like it felt really good to know that they that there's like that connection, that there's a connection, and that they still think of me like, oh, she has the answers. So even though they probably already had it. so So it's like, it's good. So those are the moments that I think for me, and again, it has to do with a lot of with my values, but also with my identities, the identities that I carry, and how is that they impact the way that I see myself and the way that I celebrate myself as well.
Anna, you still want me to share something?
Absolutely.
Gross, more warm and fuzzies. I'll try to make it snappy. I think something that just popped up for me was over the last 2 summers, I got to work with this program called the First Generation Envisioning Network, or FGen, here at Ohio State. And it was a grant-funded program. We're not really sure what was going to happen. I got to have a leadership role in creating the curriculum and facilitating it. And I think the whole time I could see little pieces of myself represented in the students I was working with, or not, and I could learn so much from them. But it made me think a lot about my own undergraduate experience and exposure to someone who just let me tell my own story rather than making assumptions about me. So in that space, I get to be myself. I get to be really silly. I get to be really serious. And ultimately, the students end up talking about a vision for their lives 15 years into the future. And it's not, what job are you going to have? How many children will you have? What kind of house will you live in? Those are components if they want to, but it's more so, what kind of person do you want to be, and how can we cultivate that at Ohio State, in Columbus, et cetera. So this year, I think what made me feel like, wow, this was truly a leadership moment that's so gratifying is one of my interns from last year got into a bunch of amazing graduate schools. And she called me and was like, Tess, you are the person who can help me make this decision. And there were all of these incredible schools that I never would have gotten into. But being able to be that resource for the student was amazing. And now that we have the next round of students who just wrapped up, many of them are sharing their vision with me and saying hey, we're back in person. Can I meet you in real life? And seeing them at Move-In when I was volunteering and things like that. It's all of these micro moments of, yeah, I got to be in this position and contribute and learn from the folks who I was serving.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing those moments. I know that we are over time, so thanks for everyone who has stayed logged on. Please help me give a huge virtual round of applause to our fabulous panel. Y'all seriously gave us so much great things to think about in regards to leadership and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. I really appreciate all that y'all contributed. I popped the Leadership Week link as well as my email in the chat. So if anyone has any questions about things tonight or other things related to Leadership Week or want to check out other great sessions, please do so. But again, thank you all so much. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your week and you attend some more Leadership Week sessions. Thanks, y'all.